I'm Ellis Ludwig Leone, the composer and co-librettist of The Night Falls. So the concept came from Karen Russell.
I'm Karen Russell. I'm a writer based in Portland, Oregon. This was originally conceived of as a sort of reimagining of the myth of the sirens for a contemporary audience. And it appears that they are singing to people in their dreams. All across America, people at various states of precarity start hearing the haunting bars of this music, and it draws them away from their real lives. It just seduces them into a sort of a very dangerous state.
What really sort of made me excited about this was that it focuses on the siren song as sort of like a through line musically through the whole piece. So it was like a really sort of exciting opportunity to try to write a piece of music so beautiful and terrible that it would drive people crazy, which you got to say yes to that challenge as a composer. So I think when Troy came to me with the idea for this piece, the first thing he said was, I want to do a type of storytelling that I haven't seen before.
I'm Troy Schumacher, the choreographer and director of The Night Falls. We had this idea of telling a story through both dance and music, but doing it in a really different way. What's fundamentally groundbreaking about this show is that it actually splits each character into two, a singing version and a dancing version. You get all of the information, but not all of it from the same source. And that's really what was so exciting for us, is that as we've set out to create this work, we realized that nothing like this really existed. It's about finding these new pathways forward and how we can take our art form, take the history, and find new combinations to really reinvent it.
I think if I wanted the audiences to take one thing away from this project, it's that it's really pushing the boundaries of what a night at the ballet or a night at the opera can sort of be from a artistic standpoint.
Music and dance can come together to tell a story in a new way, in a way that is incredibly human, in a way that's very emotional.
And good evening, everyone. I want to make sure everyone can hear me. My name is Joe Melillo, and I'm the executive producer emeritus for the Brooklyn Academy of Music. And it is really a privilege to be here this evening to have Karen Russell, who is the author, a book writer and lyricist, Ellis Ludwig Leone, who's composing the music and the lyrics as well, and Troy Schumacher, who is the director and choreographer for The Night Falls. And we're here to have a conversation about this certainly non-traditional collaboration. So how did this all start, Karen?
Hi, Joe. Thank you guys so much for coming. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. This started when I had a very new baby in 2017. And I remember that as being just sort of this like feverish, sleepless period. So, speaking of the crying of the sirens, I had my own in-house. And Troy Schumacher got in touch with me and said, hey, I've been making these ballets. I was lucky enough to graft onto a pre-existing collaboration, long-standing collaboration between Troy and Ellis. And they sent me some of these like amazing ballets that they'd made. And it wasn't a form, to be honest, that I was super familiar with. Mm-hmm. And Troy, who I'll pass the baton to in a minute, was just interested in doing something a little, more narrative. He had read a story I wrote, The Prospectors, and I think he was excited by the world of it. So we started thinking a little bit about what world building could look like in a dance forward piece, and something where dance was really the means of expression. And that, obviously was very new for me, because writing is such a solitary deal. Mostly you're taking dictation from ghosts, and then just, it's a Word document, so to think about what we could do, by combining our powers was exciting. And I think the original kernel of inspiration was just, okay, well, I have this like brilliant composer and choreographer. What if we tell a revision of the myth of the sirens? And maybe I was really interested in nightmare contagions at this time. I had just written this story about a pandemic of nightmares. So I was thinking, what if the sirens, this call of despair, starts sounding inside of people? What if there's sort of like a sonic contagion? And of course, this now has like a different resonance for us, coming out of our actual pandemic. In fact, our pandemic project was put on hiatus by a pandemic, so that's nobody's ideal. I don't know, Troy, do you want to say anything about sort of the origins of
Yeah, let's,
collaboration?
Alice?
Yeah, well, I mean, Troy was really the initial spark for this project came from Troy, because he is he runs this ballet company, Ballet Collective, who I have now written 6 ballets for, I think, and this might be the 7th, I guess, if you call it a ballet. It's sort of a hybrid, as we've been talking about. And he and I remember in maybe 2017 went to maybe 16 went to a sushi place, and we had just put on a piece that was written. It was a song cycle written for a singer, and so there was this sort of narrative aspect to it, but it was fairly abstract, where there was these songs, and it was maybe 25 minutes long, and they all sort of connected in some kind of an abstract way, but were a little bit, they weren't actually narrative. It certainly wasn't a story ballet. There was no pantomiming of plot, and Troy said, like, what if we push this further? How can we do something here that feels like a contemporary story ballet, but not quite, as, formally, something that's a little bit more of a hybrid. And so, yeah, Troy, I mean, maybe you can take it from there.
Yes, and Troy, who I want you to address, how did you meet Ellis?
Yeah, so actually in 2012, I was needing somebody to transcribe some ballets that I had collaborated with some non-musically literate composers, and I emailed Nico Muli, who Ellis was working as an assistant for at that time, and he wrote me back in like 2 minutes, and it was like him, and then it just had Ellis's email. And during that process, which Ellis was obviously really great at, Ellis sent me some of his music, and also the demo version of his band San Fermin's first album, which just really struck me as a work that held so much emotional resonance. And for me as a theater goer and as a dance goer, I love watching things when they strike something inside of me. And I think with something with ballet, which is oftentimes so backwards looking and relies upon things from decades and decades and centuries ago, it's really important for me to work with new people who have something to say. And creating a narrative work that's based in dance is an enormous challenge. And one of the things that felt like we should do is not really look backwards when we're trying to come up with what this was about. And I knew that Ellis and I could create something that held a semi-narrative emotional resonance, which is this work that Ellis had mentioned that's called Invisible Divide. And so, I spent a couple of months I had free, and I was just like, I just want to do some soul searching and figure out what I want to create more than anything. And I approached Ellis about this, and I spent the entire summer reading fiction. And I probably read 100 books or 100 short stories, and Karen's work just really stuck with Ellis and I, and that's how this whole kind of like thing sparked a little bit in brief.
All right, now back to Karen. Karen, so you are a published author, you're a writer, that is your art. What was the challenge of writing for the human voice musically?
Oh my gosh. Well, this this has been a real education for me in a great way. I think that originally, you know, Ellis said you can help me write some of these lyrics, and I was daunted because the kind of economy of a lyric, you know, was new to me, and also I think I'm so used to composing for people's minds, you know, so you acoustically what you can process in real time and how things land inside your body. I mean, that kind of body to body communication, that was really interesting. So some of the lyrics, I remember Ellis was really encouraged, you know, we were pairing stuff back, and some of the simplest lines I think hit the hardest. So that was new. One of the other things that was interesting about this show, maybe Ellis can talk about this, we ended up writing these pretty robust character biographies. You know, that was just how I had to write that to sort of figure out what the story was. And at the center of this, there's this teenager, Feliz Robles, who's, you know, he's lost his boyfriend. He's really living and sort of sleepwalking through grief. He's closeted and a loner. And, you know, we meet him at this moment where he's been haunted by this dream and this music. But there ends up being a lot about this guy that doesn't live inside the show. But the interesting thing was that, you know, when Ellis was casting the show, Ellis and Troy, finding someone who could use that biography to sort of access, you know, sort of merge their, Claire Wellen, who's on this call, actually has this amazing voice, and she's an incredible actress in addition to being a singer. And so I guess that's all to say, I think I learned that, you know, it's not enough to have mere lyrics on paper. It was like important to hand over the history of these people and what they were suffering and what they were hoping for to the singers. And that, do you want to speak to that a little bit, Ellis? Because I thought that was so interesting.
All right, back to you, Ellis.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I think, working with Karen has been truly amazing because it was such a mind meld from the beginning. It was just like, you know, we were on the same wavelength so quickly. And, you know, one of the things that has been fun about this project is that actually that process that Karen's talking about of creating a whole history for who this person is who's singing this part is actually kind of a very similar process that I have always done for my albums, for my band Stand For Mean, because I don't sing. And I write for a couple of very talented singers who I know very well and whose own personalities and lives kind of do this weird alchemy with mine when I write for them. And so I can put things into lyrics for them that I would never say myself, but they are some part of me. So there's a very sort of writerly aspect to that, and just in the idea of creating characters and then speaking through them. So I think that was really helpful when Karen and I were kind of doing the first pass of these lyrics. It's just like, who is this person? Who's this person? Who's this person? And, you know, there's this you create a world for each of them. So then by the time it actually gets to the page, like you're just seeing 10% of that whole sort of the homework that you've done for those people, which is kind of what it's like to write, you know, for my band, where, you know, 90% of the lyrics get, you know, rejected offhand by the singers or by me. There's a whole sort of scrap heap of history of all these songs. And the thing that you actually get at the end is just that little.
And then we gravitate to you, Troy, in terms of your involvement with Karen and Ellis in knowing that the characters within the narrative, you want them to move, you want them to dance. Can you talk and address that aspect of this creative collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So, you know, we set some ground rules pretty early on in this show, and we knew that it was needed to be something that could show two facets of each character, because what we were thinking is that this show creates a world in which the dancers are, you know, that's people, like people dance as life. So it's not like somebody singing and then they go off to the side and start dancing. It's just like, dance is the language of the show. It's a physical language. So we've been so closely collaborating. Like we have these hours long meetings whenever we're working on this, because, there's not a lot of comparable works to what we're trying to achieve here, and how we're trying to show one character expressed through two very kind of different people, and creating, like Ellis was saying, like how him and Carrot have this mind meld. It's like this character actually has a mind meld in itself. So, I find that we have these extremely developed characters very helpful, because that's all you have when you're creating choreography. You have a character, which is a person, and how they can physically embody that. And then you have movement. And, that's not enough always to really get across story in a complex way, right? Without doing like, pantomime, which is completely irrelevant when you're talking about a story that takes place today. And so it's this give and take that we are constantly figuring out when we're having these collaborative meetings about like what should really be told through dance and what should be told through, voice. And, generally the answer is like, what is the thing that only lyrics can tell? And what is the thing that only music can tell? And what is the only thing that dance can tell?
And how do the three of you navigate through all that? You do understand what we're communicating, that we're listening to you. And one of the more complex artistic achievements in this hybrid, non-traditional creation. And the three of you are swimming in the same ocean. And how do you solve the creative challenges? How did you solve the creative challenges?
Yeah, it feels, Karen said this the other day, but she said it was just basically that we really set the incline to like hard in that every single moment of this show kind of has to work on a couple different levels, like both on the sort of the straightforward level of like what's happening plot wise, also on this sort of metaphorical level of the split between the singers and the dancers and why that is happening, and then also on this sort of other level of that you don't ever want the music to be stepping on the toes of the dance, which I find is always the worry for me, is that like the dance has to be meeting you halfway. Like you can't be telling too much with the music, and at the same time creating the correct expectations for the audience so that they're not like lost in this sort of uncanny valley between theater and abstract dance. So I think a lot of it happens from there's this sort of like, I feel a little bit like I'm sort of in the middle. I'm like this sort of translator from Karen world into Troy world, where it's like this amazing beautiful piece of writing, and then it's like this is 2 minutes in G minor, like so it's like really like specific sort of taking these sort of abstracted things and turning them into just chunks of time almost. I don't know, Karen.
That is totally, that's been a real education for me too, Joe, because, when you're revising a story, it's actually, the overhead is very low. You can kind of like delete whole paragraphs, and with this show, to kind of revise a show, we've had a couple iterations now, and it's sort of like turning a great ship around, there's so many pieces. So Troy, just to get into the studio to choreograph, is no easy thing, certainly not right now, or for Ellis to get studio time. So that is like logistically, financially, that's been an interesting challenge to navigate. And then I think the big thing for us is like, how do we control for tone? So this show, has like a genuine horror, right? We're taking the suffering of its characters really seriously, but some of the infrastructure around it is light and hopefully funny, and strange. And I should have mentioned that this is these are Floridian sirens. So they, if you've ever been to Weeki Wachee Springs or seen some of these roadside attractions, we were imagining their origin story. It's not really a revision so much as a new iteration of the siren myth. So these sisters who sing inside this sort of limestone grotto called the Night Falls. Once upon a time, it was just like a tourist trap. They weren't singing to cause any shipwrecks, or kill sailors. They were just drawing Volvos down to the parking lot and trying to get tourists to open up their wallets. And then there's a tragic accident, and now we were just sort of imagining they haunt this grotto, right? So what ends up happening is everyone who has this dream of the song, sees these commercials that start airing again very mysteriously. And they recognize the song from their dream. Only here it has this sort of like kitschy commercial incarnation as like a jingle inviting tourists down to the Nightfalls. They all come to this campground, and then it's almost like our Decameron, you know, down there in Florida while they're tailgating Nightfall and this concert. So it's like a really tonally, it was just an interesting story. I found some notes to these guys from, you know, an earlier version where I just said, we need more darkness and more humor. To my mind, the humor can come from the way we toggle holographically between the genuine nightmares these people are experiencing, their real suffering, and the hokiness of a tourist trap, the Nightfalls. Let's go for startling incongruities. We have the sirens, shadows, silhouettes that these people are seeing in their dreams. And then they turn on the TV, you know, or they turn on the screen. That's been another thing that we show our age there, right? Like Troy has always pointed out, like, who watches TV in 2021? But coming through a screen is sort of this Lynchian commercial for the Nightfalls. So it sort of has these two lives a little bit, right? There really are these sort of monstrous shadows meant to evoke the seduction of despair, you know, one's desire to fall. And one thing that has been cool about working like this, you know, it hasn't really been sort of like a baton pass exactly. The three of us are always talking. So I think I've had other projects where I just sort of hand something over and then someone else gives life to it, you know? And it's sort of like that's also incredibly exciting. But this has been such a ground up collaboration, and we all kind of give feedback on each other's mediums. And that, you know, so Troy, you know, the idea of like vertigo as the longing to fall, I can write that on paper and who cares, really? And when Troy choreographs despair as a seduction, you feel it, you know, so viscerally. And I think that to me is really the strength of this story. You know, you see all these isolated sufferers become a community in such a physical way. You see their repertoire of movements increasing. You see someone tell a story in a story ballet, and now there's an alphabet that these people share. And it's almost like watching a human geometry form. So I think that is another challenge of the show. But what's exciting about telling it this way is you get to see in real time the ligatures between bodies building, an alphabet building. And these people who show up at this place totally broken down, divided from themselves, they start to revive themselves through art, you know, through sharing these stories. And sort of we move into this tug of war, right, between the sirens and these sort of humble humans. And in the original myth, Odysseus has his men lash him to the mast so that he can pass through. And in this story, these like weird, broken people just lash themselves to one another. And that to me has a new resonance in 2021 also, right? Like, as we're sort of tentatively moving into some new future, new unknown.
That is certainly true. I think that we also should address the fact that you are geographically in three different directions or destinations, and that a percentage of your creativity and collaboration has been on the wonderful protocol called Zoom. Address how much that was a challenge to the three of you.
Well, I often I find I have a certain Zoom fatigue at this point from just in general the kind of year of craziness that we just went through. And so it really says a lot that actually, you know, we just finished this virtual residency that we were really generously sort of offered by this amazing organization that's been supporting us through Project Springboard. What that sort of ended up being weirdly was this, we were able to, in a very sort of counterintuitive way, I guess I felt like the Zoom was actually fun for the first time in like 6 months. And actually we were able to work together really seamlessly because, you know, both Karen and Troy have small kids, they're in, very distant areas, but we could, set aside 3 or 4 hours a day to just be, present while we were working together. And also we were working on the libretto in Google Docs. So it's like, there's something very comforting in seeing, Karen's little cursor over here and, here, and me over here. And like, I'd write something and like, Troy would fix my spelling as we went, or, whatever it was. And there's something really nice and communal in a very sort of counterintuitive way about that. So I think if anything, it really just spoke to like how strong the collaboration currently feels, that those were fun and not a drag.
Yeah. Got it. Got it.
And the first year that we were working on this basically was, in 2017, 18, we were on Zoom. Like Karen and I didn't meet in person for a whole year, but we felt like we knew each other so well because it was like we were just having this method of communication. So, maybe it feels better for Ellis because it has this element of nostalgia, like back when it was like a wonderful, fresh tool for us.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Delightful. Now, Troy, again, our guests who are watching don't know that I actually got to experience the workshop that the three of you produced at the New York City Ballet Studios. And what I want you to address is because I know it for a fact, but you have to explain it, how the scenery is going to work. That, because Karen was addressing tone, and you have the surreal and the real, and you have a lot going for you in terms of an element of kitschy, this trio sirens. But can you just address the physical and environment, which is obviously both what the scenic artists and the costume designers that you're going to be working with?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the major points of the show that Karen was talking about is that these people are divided. And what that really means is, Karen puts it very poetically, like it's this song splits the self who wants to live apart from the self who wants to fall. And it's the self that wants to live that kind of is, hovering above the dancers, and by they're not floating in a flying suit. They're on a different plane, which is a slightly elevated platform behind and above the main stage. And what for a part of what this represents for us is kind of those moments where you are doing something and it's like your brain is telling you to stop, and you just are having this somewhat out of body experience where you're watching yourself, do this thing, whatever it is, and you just you become powerless. And that's really what this represents. And that's what these characters are feeling. It's like this part of them is removed. The dancer doesn't necessarily know it's gone, but the singer is kind of watching this body devolve in kind of anguish because they're powerless to help. So it's important that throughout the experience, you're watching these two characters almost, moving with each other across the stage, right? The dancers don't sing and the singers don't dance, but it's to kind of represent this, continual, journey that these two beings are, stuck on, especially the singer.
I also just to quickly jump on that. I think one of the things that was a real surprise from our first movement workshop was it reminded me of some paintings that I love where, in a really good painting, sometimes you don't really know quite where to look, like your eye keeps moving back and forth, and it makes you it's a very active experience. And what was very cool about this, I mean, it's such an artificial thing to be splitting characters into two. It's such as we said before, the incline sort of set high in terms of what you're asking from the audience, but it was really rewarding to watch it physically happening, because you realize that you're just, as an audience member, you're activated even more by constantly trying to find out the connections between these two versions of the same person. And in this sort of mesmerizing way, you kind of get into this hypnotic mode of viewing that I think was really interesting and unusual.
Mm-hmm. And Karen, do you feel challenged by the physical environment that Troy was developing for your work?
Oh, I will say it has made writing feel pretty lonely and anticlimactic in some ways. That was my first experience of live theater, and it was so hard to just go back to a desk because there is something so immediate about it. I will say also, thinking it's funny, it's practical and metaphorical in some ways because we needed a place for the singers to be visible and present but the action is happening through the dance.
Mhm.
So it just was a lucky thing in some ways that we came up with this staging, I think, that seems to work with a show where Siren Song, the Song of Despair, is um, atomizing people in this way. But it does feel a little different in 3D. It's sort of like doing air traffic control for a metaphor, you know? It's like, thank God for Troy, because there's so many people, you know?
Yes,
It's like,
correct, totally.
and it's, you know, there have been times where we've talked about, you know, I'm like, oh gosh, could there just be a voiceover or a teleprompter? Like, you think about what language can immediately convey. And I'm glad that Troy is always that I think that is a lazy and that would break the spell in a way. And it's,
Right.
there's something really, you know, in this current version, I think what the dance can do is evoke these emotional states, you know, the vortical spin that you feel in your own body when you see it. And Ellis's music too, I mean, I really feel when I listen to it, kind of these two poles, you know, the call, the undertow of despair and something calling you home. And that's a beautiful part of this show to me. And it has made, like, yeah, I mean, even just saying it out loud, you know, I was rereading some of the original story and I was like, oh, it lives in this kinetic space now. And the leap of empathy is something that I think has become almost a cliche. We all talk about empathy frequently. There's a way where to feel it embodied, to sort of see somebody telling their story through movement and then that rippling out other bodies, mirroring those movements, you know, it just feels like the prime integer of story to me. It's like, oh, that's right. We're not trapped in our privacy. There's something in us that wants to meet and merge. And the dance communicates that so powerfully. So, but yeah, it's a big change from just typing.
Ellis, let's talk about the music and the musical instrumentation that you've structured for the sound of.
Yeah. Well, I would say this has been the most sort of palette expanding piece of music I've ever sort of undertaken, just in terms of what's being asked of the music to accomplish. Like when Karen did say, like, this piece of music should, you know, drive you to despair, and you know, it'd be so beautiful that you know, are driven mad, and then this piece of music needs to tether you even more to the people around you. And so it's a very athletic thing to then try to be like, okay, what does that mean? Just like, is it this chord? Like, is it this one? Like, there's a real sort of practicality to that. And another thing that's been a real challenge and really exciting for me has been tone, like trying to convey. I mean, one of the things that's so amazing about Karen's writing is that even though we're talking about despair and these sirens and this sort of like all this stuff that feels very dark, like it's so funny and it's so just like personable, and the tone of her writing is there's always this sense that there's like an intelligence over here kind of modulating reality as you're reading her stories. And like, man, that is a hard thing to translate into music, you know. So to make it feel like, you know, both this kind of earnest expression of emotional states for these different characters, and also a little bit of like a side eye of being like, okay, but you know, we're kind of messing with you here too. And I think that bringing that humor into the music has been really like sort of one of the last keys that I feel like we're starting to unlock in a way where it undercuts some of the earnestness of just the basic idea of dance, which is just it's a very earnest art form in many ways, because you're out there performing this thing, and to have this kind of subtle undercut and humor cutting through it has been a really fun challenge musically.
Have you changed the instrumentation as you've done these, whether virtual or in-person collaborations, rehearsals?
Yeah.
Where are you now in the music? We have
it's sort of a chamber ensemble instrumentation that's about like 7 or 8 musicians, but it's basically like a tiny little sinfonietta in terms of there being 1 or 2 from every food group, you know, like there's a couple strings, couple winds, and and there's actually a little bit of synth work as well, which mostly gets these sort of rumbly sounds that are connected to the sort of geologic forces at play when the Nightfalls event happens, when there's this kind of like earth sound. And so they all kind of get mapped out in certain sort of leitmotif kind of ways. And then also there's a lot of, you know, trying to find an earworm that is this siren song that can both work in this sort of austere, beautiful, terrible way, and also can work as like a jingle, a commercial for a you know, basically a, you know, like a tourist trap. And so that was also that's threaded through all of it as well.
Got it. So Troy, what is the trajectory here now to the birthing cycle, practically and professionally?
Yeah, I mean, so we were talking about this on our Zoom on Monday. We're just finishing up this Project Springboard residency that Ellis mentioned. And this was a great, you know, we've had kind of like these 3 residency periods. We had Project Springboard, and then the American Opera Project had a vocal workshop, you know, in 2019. And then we were speaking with the Project Springboard people again, and we were like, we feel like we know what we really want to do now, right? At each stage, we've come off with a lot of energy, but we've known that like there's more work to do. And you know, this past month that we've really been focused on this was about like, what is the version of this story? And in the midst of all of this, like a big part of this show is trying to get people to feel like, what do people feel like when they're in a, you know, an emotional pandemic? And we all know that now. So
yeah,
like,
we certainly do.
that work has been done for us, sadly. And so, you know, now it's really been about like, how do we fine tune the story? And it's really at the stage where, you know, we just have finished recording a whole new slate of demos for the whole show. And we're really ready for like another staging and workshop. And then we want to try to get this up here, because this is really about people forming a community to deal with these existential threats. And you know, we are like, this feels so important right now to give people. And so we're doing everything we can to, you know, keep it going and figure out that next step for it.
And so the next step for the 3 of you is actually a creative process that delivers an opening night. You feel strong enough about all of the project work, all the workshops that you've had, both virtually and in person, et cetera, and where the 3 artists are at this moment.
I think so. I mean, we've had so like, what's really amazing and, you know, singular about this 3-way collaboration that we've had is that like the 3 of us feel 100% comfortable in like the nicest way, just being like, I don't know. I don't think that's a good idea. And we've all said it to each other, right? And we just like, we have these really honest, open, artistic conversations. And so we've had all of those. And, you know, sometimes it's Karen and Ellis are like, no, Troy. And sometimes Troy and Karen are like, no, Ellis. And, you know, all of this. And it's like, we find this common ground of how we're, you know, satisfying all of our artistic needs in, you know, in the purpose of like telling this story that we all really believe in.
Okay, so we're now at the moment where I need to just, can you clarify, you have produced 2 videos that we're going to show. Do you want to set that up right now? Because the next part is to have Melanie read any question that we want you to address, but could you do the setup of the videos?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first video is called Are You Someone They Sing To? And this is the moment where these sufferers arrive at the Nightfalls campground. And they don't know who each other are. They've had these nightmares, and then they saw this random commercial summoning them to this tourist trap on this particular day. And they show up. They don't know if these other people just like happen to be at this derelict campground, and they're just trying to really get some answers. And one of the characters just kind of breaks the ice and just asks like, are you someone they sing to?
Right.
And then over the course of this day, there's this ominous sign saying that echoes will begin at nightfall. And people are like, did these sirens lure us down here to kill us? Or like, what is happening? Are we imagining this whole thing? And then they kind of organically begin telling each other stories. And so this is the second video, is one of the characters that, talking about like, where did he come from? What happened to him? And each one of these people has a very different relationship to this nightmare. For some, it's like they want to hear the song more. For some of them, it's ruining their lives. For some of them, it's, making them become different people from who they want to be. So this is just, one of the examples.
Troy and Joe, would it be fun to hear just the paragraph that inspired the video, or I can?
Yeah, go for it, Karen.
Really fast. So this, I found this. I was like, and maybe that'll give a little context. That Troy did a beautiful job. But this was from the original. It wasn't even a libretto. This was like a kind of a scenario that I wrote and sent to Troy and Ellis. More people appeared at the trailhead to the Nightfalls campground. They had a uniformly stunned appearance, slack faces and weary yellowish eyes. The song had stamped them. The siren song had turned people of various ages, races, religions into siblings. You could not mistake the family resemblance among these total strangers. Sanity is a consensus game. The savvy lunatic knows to pretend to see only the colors of the rainbow. But finally, Felice could talk about the sounds that flooded his skull at night. These notes he heard that were otherworldly. Only sirens with their wings and scales could soar and dive into those octaves. A kind of infrared music. He could talk about it in a raw whisper, most of his description ellipses, and trust that now he'd be understood, because these strangers knew exactly what he was talking about. They knew the fatal song by heart. Voices from the campground. I thought I was going nuts, to tell you the truth. I couldn't believe it when I heard that song coming out of speakers. Oh, I lost everything, my job, my mind. I started hearing that song and I couldn't go to work anymore. I keep forgetting to take my medicine. I want to go home to my mom, but the song is waiting for me there too. Anywhere I go, it goes. Well, I got out of my bed and I drove through the night to Florida. It was the damnedest thing. This will sound perverse, but a part of me wanted the song to start again because the wait was agony. It got to where the waiting was the central event of my life. The whole world feels like a waiting room now, waiting room Earth. I read that and I was like,
terrific.
2020.
Love it. All right, Melanie.
Are you someone they sing to? Does hell fill your head? Is there somewhere you're yearning to go? Are you someone they sing to? Do the red flakes leap inside you at night when the song blows in? Are you a man? Are you a man? Are you their concert hall in skin? Do they fill you? Do they spill into you? Do they chase you into sleep and eat the dreams you once had? Do you hesitate to name them? Do you ache to hear them again?
Nice, Rory.
Thank you.
Okay, Melanie. Okay. Here we go.
Carving pumpkins with candles for eyes. I turned to Lola and said, marry me. She caught a wide smile out of her face. Winter came, we were unafraid. January wedding, frosted hair on the bride. She wanted a baby. I said later we tried. We were 19 and had nothing but time. Nothing but time. Love kept us warm for a while. Love kept us aglow. But I love the piano. Oh, I love the piano. First, I was trying to get famous. Then I was failing to get famous. Thwarted Orpheus, possessed by a song. It was a love triangle. Me, my wife, and my piano. The first song I wrote is the one she loves best. A simpler melody doesn't exist. Not a song for the ages or a song to charm stones. Lola's song is for her ears alone. I left my wife for a song. She left to prove I was gone.
How nice. Troy, where did you shoot that last clip?
It was actually we were upstate in Millbrook, New York, this summer for Ballet Collective residency, and we need to do these videos. And I found this hayloft, this old barn of this nature preserve, and we just like went up there. I don't think anybody had been up there in a very long time.
Right.
It was just like magic. In one corner, there's all of these old, abandoned furniture from who knows when. And, I just kind of like stomped around. I had somebody underneath me to make sure all the wood was kind of like,
yeah, right.
We kept them in the middle. And it was just kind of this stunning kind of like, shell. It'd be an amazing performing arts space.
What a discovery, actually.
Yeah, incredible.
Again, I want to compliment you on the shooting, the intimacy of the male solo. I mean, you captured, and when it needed to be in landscape, you gave it the distance, and love it. Really, quite lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was just, you really need to know that. It was like, wow, this is a really beautiful passage. Fabulous.
Thanks.
Good. All good. All right. Melanie, are you going to return to the video? Here she is.
Hello. So we have a very shy audience, but I just wanted to say I have never seen three people who collaborate with each other who smile at each other so much. It is the sweetest. You can tell there's so much love for this project. One thing that I am curious about is I know you're all in 3 different geographic areas. Where are you all?
I'm in Portland, Oregon. And I have to say, Melanie, I was also smiling at one point, like a lobotomy patient, because I saw my dad in the chat. That's never happened before, guys. My dad, Bruce Russell, my 79-year-old dad, who like pretends like he can't turn the phone on and like calls CDs little records, but he's here. Thanks for coming, Dad.
Hey, Dad, thank you for showing up.
Amazing. Yeah. And I'm in Portland right now. But lifelong Floridian. Love drew me out here, not a siren.
Ellis, where are you?
I'm in Brooklyn, not far from the Center for Fiction. I'm around the corner, actually, in Fort Greene.
Great.
Yeah.
And Troy?
I am in Atlanta, but I don't live here. I'm just here for work. I do live up in Hudson Heights by the Cloisters in northern Manhattan, but I'm not in Atlanta.
Yeah. Excellent. All right, Melanie, thank you very much.
Well, thank all of you. This is beautiful. And I saw the videos earlier, and when I saw them again after hearing you all talk about it, I had goosebumps the whole time. Really beautiful, incredible work. So grateful to have you all with us tonight. Yeah, thanks a lot. And thanks to our audience.
All right, can't wait.
Well, thanks, American Opera Project and Center for Fiction.
Thank you, Project Springboard, as well, for your support on this. This has been really fun to work on, and we're excited to see you at an actual concert soon.